Welcome back, you guys. We're in section 4 of DIY technical design, where we're going to be talking all about stitch and seam types and construction callouts for your tech pack. Let's get started. So first, let's just remind ourselves what our callout page is. Your callout page is going to be inside of your tech pack. It will have your technical sketches on it, and then you will be calling out all of your construction details and your stitch and seam types on that sketch. As you guys probably remember from video 1, the number one rule, good practice for creating your tech pack is to never duplicate information. That is especially important on your callout page because this is where most people are going to end up duplicating information. So just ask yourself, can this go anywhere else in the tech pack before putting it onto your callout page? If the answer is yes, do not include it on your callout page and instead put it in its rightful place. So that goes for anything that goes on the BOM page, like fabric, trims, buttons, zippers, anything like that, and measurements as well. Except for the stitch width or the placement from the seam, which those measurements will go on your callout page. Do not include any other measurements. If you're trying to call out the placement for a logo or a graphic, you will include that on a separate art page. The formula for calling out your stitch and seam types is pretty simple. All it is your stitch or seam width plus the number of needles, or you can think about it as the number of threads, and then the name of the stitch. The reason that this is my industry approved preferred method is because it's super clear and concise. As long as you know the abbreviations, it's really easy to read. Plus it calls out the stitch width or seam width, which the other ways of calling out stitches don't actually call that out, which is a really important thing to include. So the difficult part about this is trying to learn all the stitch and seam types. As long as you communicate with your factory about what your formula is for writing callouts and what your standards are, then you're pretty much fine. You can manipulate them a little bit to better fit you and the way that you think, as long as you communicate it with your factory. I've also created a stitch and seam guide for you guys if you want to use it. It breaks down the complicated stitches that we'll be getting into in a little bit and puts them into a format, the formula that I just told you, and puts them into a format that's a little bit easier to use and understand. It also has pictures with it, as well as some basic callouts that aren't stitch and seam types for you to use in your day-to-day tech pack DIYs. So I'm sure you're wondering, okay, how do I learn about what these stitch and seam types are, what they do, and what they look like? As always, please go check out the blog because I go into a little bit more detail. That's where I have a bunch of my links. There are several places that you can find the information that you need. Some of them are free, some of them aren't. ASTM does have a standard, although they are not industry standard, but they do have a list that you can purchase. There's also this book, which is a great resource. I've also linked that in my blog post. And there is a free resource as well that I've put in my blog post. In my blog post and in this book, they only call out what the stitches are in their class type. They don't go into the widths and what that means, so my guide is kind of like my preferred method, but you can also call out stitches this way too. So let's talk about the 6 different classes of stitch and seam types. So class 100 is simple chain stitches, single thread. Those are going to be great for fabrics that need to stretch just slightly. If you want something that is going to not stretch, that will be in class 300. We'll get there in a minute. But chain stitches are going to be used in like back neck tape in t-shirts because it gives a little bit of stability, but it still has that stretch in that knit fabric. Class 200 are hand stitches and their machine simulations. We won't be going into that. They're basically decorative stitches that you most likely won't be using, but just so you know, those are there. Class 300 are lock stitches, and that's your basic sewing machine. If you've ever done home sewing, that's like your basic home sewing stitch. It's frequently used in ready to wear. It's your most common stitch, and it won't have any stretch in it, so it's great for wovens. Class 400 are multi-thread chain stitch and cover stitches, and these are usually used in jeans, wovens, casual pants, and they are also used in seaming knits. And that's why if you've ever tried to home sew knits, you've probably had a really hard time unless you have a serger, because a serger allows that seam to stretch just a little bit with the fabric, as well as cleaning the edges. And as you can see, I'm reading from this book because I don't even have all of these things memorized. I actually don't think about stitches by their class type, just because it's not very common in the industry to reference that, but it is good to know. Class 500 are over edge stitches, non-safety stitches, and safety stitches. And these are most commonly used to edge finish, and they just basically provide that little over edge on the edge of any fabric that you are trying to finish the edges of. Class 600 are cover stitches and flat locks, and these will be used to stitch knits and cut and sew jersey. If you have ever seen leggings or worn leggings, bought leggings, usually how the seams are finished are they're overlapped and then flat seamed, so that's these stitch types. The last thing that I wanted to talk about before I get into the tutorial of how to write out your callouts on your technical sketch and add them into your tech pack is basic garment construction, and I just kind of wanted to give a basic overview. Garment construction is very complicated, and I could do an entire series just based on that. If you guys want that, comment below, let me know and I'll add it to my list. But I wanted to just kind of touch on what are the things that you need to look out for when you are putting callouts onto your technical sketch and into your tech pack. So the number one thing is that you want to be sure to call out any top stitching that you have. Whether it's single needle, double needle, whatever it may be, always call out your top stitching, which will be seen on your sketch, so definitely include that in your sketch as well in your drawing. For your seams, you don't need to call out every single seam unless it's different than all of the others. Maybe you have a flat filled seam and then the rest are serged. But you can do just sort of an overarching statement, or you could even talk to your factory and let them know, hey, I'm always going to want a safety stitch on every single garment, and so they just know that, and so then you don't need to include it in the tech pack going forward. That's really up to you. Some other callouts that you'll want to keep in mind are exposed zipper widths, if there's special stitching on pockets, anything that maybe can't be seen on the sketch. If it's something super complicated like an outerwear piece that has a lining, be sure to include that lining drawing. But in some cases, maybe you'll have an understitch that on a hem or something that you won't be able to see in the sketch, and just be sure to add an arrow and call that out. If you're at a little bit of a loss for your specific type of garment and what callouts might be necessary for that, go ahead and take a look at garments similar to yours on maybe competitor websites or even in stores and see what the product description says. And sometimes that can help give you terms that you'll want to use with your factory. I won't be going into a full comprehensive list for every single type of garment because that would just be insanely huge. I can definitely create it if you guys are interested in that, or I can even create a comprehensive list for specific types of garments. You can just let me know. I do custom services, so if that's something that you need, definitely contact me. However, in the stitch and seam guide that I talked about earlier, I also will be including some common types of callouts to kind of help you on your way, just common things that you will most likely see in the types of garments that you're creating. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is start to add our top stitch callouts. So all I want to do is add a line to wherever I'm seeing these top stitches. So I'm going to do this neck callout first. Change your line to be whatever width you want, and then the arrowhead to be whatever size you'd like. And I'm going to make mine red. As long as you're consistent, you can do whatever sort of formatting you'd like. And then we're going to call out what this stitch is. Don't forget to add the distance away from the neck seam that you want the stitch to be. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And then we're going to add the hem callouts next. Since I know that both of these hems are going to be the same type of hem, I am going to make them into one callout. And you can consolidate callouts wherever it makes sense. And you could stack them if you don't want it to be that wide. You could stack them like this. However you want to format it is fine. Now the thing that's different about the hems is you want to call out what type of hem it's going to be. So for these, it's not a faced hem, it's a turned hem. For the back neck tape, we also want to call it out. Even though it's on the inside of the garment, we want to make sure that we call out that information. And I notice that I'm not putting in back neck tape on this call out because the back neck tape, I don't want to call out that trim. I'm going to put that on the BOM. Now for the pocket, we're going to do something a little bit different. We want to call out how the pocket is constructed. And so for this example, this is a patch pocket, edge stitched, and turned one needle lock stitch for the top hem. Now I'm not calling out the distance for the one needle lock stitch because the hem of the pocket and the placement of the pocket and all those measurements are going to be on the POM page. So I've already called out the distance for this outside stitch, which is going to be on the edge. Now you can do an overarching statement, maybe down here, or you could do it on the top, wherever you want, and say all join seams equal mock safety stitch.
And if you want to like call that out, make sure, you know, they're going to be able to see it. Sometimes I'll put it in a red box instead of calling out every single join seam. Sometimes it can be helpful, depending on the factory, to call out that this is a shoulder seam and this is a side seam, since you're not going to be able to see that on the sketch unless you do a side view, but that is up to you. All right, so let's put our sketches into the tech pack. To add the sketches to the tech pack, we'll need to highlight and do Command C or copy. And then we're going to go down here. This is my tech pack template, which is available on my website. We're going to go down to construction details, make sure we're on that page. And of course, you'll have all of this information filled out on yours. We're going to right click and we're going to do paste special. And we're going to paste it as a PDF. Then you can resize it to wherever you want. When it prints out, this page 1 won't be in the background. And there you go. So whenever you update your callouts on your sketch, you can just add them again, same way. You'll make the updates in your vector program like Illustrator, and then you will go into your tech pack and replace the sketches.
All right, guys, that does it for section 4. I hope this was helpful. Again, if you need anything specific to your type of garment, please reach out to me. Be sure to check out the blog post to get all of the links that I talked about. And of course, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And I will see you guys next week for section 5.